All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Teaching and Learning Conference. You are in room number 6, session number 2. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our two presenters this morning. Our first presenter is Sarah Ledon. Sarah began her educational journey by serving as a classroom teacher in a general education and special education classroom. She also served as an instructional coach and school leader. Prior to joining TNTP, Sarah served as executive director with the Achievement Network, ANET, for 4 years, working alongside district and school teams in Nevada and California with a focus on instructional leadership and strategic planning. Our second speaker this morning is Raj V. Balakia. She is a senior manager in the consulting division with TNTP. She is passionate about educational equity and committed to working with school communities to provide all students with a high quality education. Rajvi began her career as a special education teacher, then served as an instructional coach and school leader. And with that, I'll turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We are very excited you have chosen to join us for this next session and possibly the section after. So we'd love for you right now, before we get started, to go ahead and put your favorite book of all time or a book that's left a lasting impression with you into the chat. All right. Seeing some great books. Keep them coming. And as mentioned, just in case, if you, hopefully you're here to engage in Science of Reading 101. If you thought this was another session but would like to stay, that would be great too. All right, I see some more books coming in. Great books. All right, keep those coming. We're going to loop back to those here in just a moment. But in the meantime, as shared, my name is Sarah Ledon. I'm super excited to be here. We'd also love to kind of pivot and into the chat now, have you add your name, your role, and maybe a reason why you chose this session. So go ahead and shift into sharing more a little bit about you.
There's some teachers, a literacy strategist, school leaders, excuse me.
All right, keep those coming. I love, one of the things I love the most about Nevada is the diversity of our state. And as we're seeing, we've got folks coming in with all kinds of roles from across the state, which is very exciting. Another thing to name is we definitely appreciate the engagement. We know it's virtual and Saturday, and you are all here, which is amazing. So please continue to jump into the chat, use your emojis, raise your hands, come off of mute. We know this next hour is going to fly by, so we just appreciate you all being here. With that, before we jump in, we did want to spend just a moment telling you a little bit about TNTP in case you are not familiar with our organization and our work, both across the country and in the beautiful Silver State of Nevada. So we work for TNTP, which is a national nonprofit, and we're actually super proud of the fact that we were founded by teachers around that idea of really implementing high quality education and teaching for all students so that students graduate ready for success in college, career, or a life that they determine is best for them. We do that in a couple of different ways. We believe in the development and diversity of recruiting talent. We spend a lot of time focused on content and academics, standards, instructional best practices, and really building that through sustainability. TNTP is an organization that prides ourselves on working within the communities in which we serve. One of the reasons that I'm really excited to be a part of TNTP is this mixture of, as I shared, we're a national organization. TNTP works with over 300 school systems across the country in very large urban areas, in very rural areas, with charters, with public, with private schools. We bring this national perspective that we learn from our partners and are able to make connections, combined with local context. TNTP has been working in Nevada for many years now, and here's some of the work that we're doing. TNTP supports Nevada Teaching Fellows, which is based out of Las Vegas, and that's where we recruit and select teacher fellows candidates. And we're super proud of being able to ensure that Clark County School District and Southern Nevada charters have access to some amazing teachers. We also support curriculum adoption, implementation, leadership coaching, professional learning, and we're currently doing that work in Washoe County, just wrapped up in Story, Mineral County. We've also worked in Elko and also in Clark County School District as well. So we are super proud. We also reflect the diversity of the great state of Nevada. And previously, we've also worked with the Nevada Department of Ed to support Read by Grade 3 professional learning across the state as well. Before we get into kind of the content and materials for today, we did kind of want to spend just a very brief couple of moments on TNTP's opportunity myth. We recognize some of you may be very familiar with the opportunity myth, and some of you, this might be the first time hearing about it. So I'll try to be as brief as I can, and we can follow up with materials and resources if this is interesting to you. So a few years ago, TNTP reviewed more than, I think it was 2,700 classrooms around the country. We really wanted to understand what was the student experience happening in our classrooms. What we found was that 2 and 3 classrooms were not actually rigorous enough to prepare students for college. And 3 and 4 teachers were not adapting the way they teach to meet high academic standards. So again, then this had us thinking and wondering about how and where are students experiencing this gap, and actually what was there to be done about it. So we decided to do a little bit more investigating and talking to students. Here's where the opportunity myth kind of comes to a head. We tell kids and families that if they show up to school, they work hard, they do their assignments, they will leave school ready to enter college, career, military, whatever their hopes and dreams are. What we found is that as we reviewed student assignments, students did succeed 71% of the time on their assignments. They were getting the work done, they were getting their A's and B's, they were in this belief that they were on track to meet their post K-12 goals. But what we actually dug into the assignments themselves, we then found that students met grade level standards 17% of those exact same assignments. Only 17% of the assignments were actually helping kids get ready for beyond K-12. So even though most of the students were showing up, doing the work, meeting the demands, we were not preparing them for college and career ready. The good news is through all of this studying and report and our work across the country, we did identify 4 key resources and opportunities that will influence a student's experiences and outcomes. 1, kids need consistent opportunities to work on grade appropriate assignments. 2, strong instruction. That's where we want kids doing the majority of the thinking in a lesson. The kids are doing the lift. 3 is around engagement and making sure kids are engaged in their work. And 4, teachers that have high expectations for their students and believe that they can achieve grade level standards. So with that, we're going to toggle back into the current landscape in Nevada. We pulled a little bit of data around our communities in Nevada. Let me pause for a minute so you can read these. So as I shared, you'll notice throughout the data, it also reaffirms that in our state, we have a very diverse population within the community of students that reflect multiple diversities around race, language, identity, religion, as well. So hold that in mind, because we're going to toggle a little bit more so to look at 4th grade in the Silver State. So this data comes from 2022 and the National Assessment of Educational Progress scores. And so this data is across the state of Nevada. So when you look at this data for 4th graders in our state, we think about 27% of our students are performing at or above proficiency. And then you look at some of the subgroup populations with students that identify as Hispanic or Latinx, students that identify as Black. There's very clearly also an achievement gap in the state of Nevada as well. So when we first started, we asked everyone to reflect on a book that was meaningful for you or it left a lasting impression. And the connection here that we want to make is around identity and equity. So for example, when we've done this activity before, or I was thinking about one of my favorite books, growing up, I loved the Little House on the Prairie books and used to just devour them growing up in Nevada. And so as I think about my identity and the instructional power I have in a classroom or a school, it made me realize there was a connection around how I identified with Little Women as a white female growing up in a very traditional family community. There was a reason I navigated towards these books. And it made me think about, again, the instructional power that I have in classrooms and the choices that I'm making around books that I'm putting in front of children, materials that I'm selecting, how I am holding expectations for all students in my classroom. So as we go through today's session and you start to reflect around your instructional power and the choices you make, we definitely want to continue to connect and make those connections to our identities.
Thanks, Sarah. As Mark said earlier, my name is Rajvi Balakia. I'm excited to be with you all this morning. Actually, I live in Atlanta, so I'm going to try to remember that it is morning for everyone since it is afternoon for me. And then also just a quick note, we have some pretty bad thunderstorms, so you might hear some thunder as I'm talking, and hopefully my internet connection stays with us. So beauty of virtual sessions. We're just going to pause for a second here and take a look at what we're going to spend the next hour. And if you're joining us for the second session, the next 2 hours talking about. So we're going to spend the first half of our time together on the first objective of how students learn to read and establish a common understanding of what strong instruction looks like in practice. We'll then dig into these best practices and see some in action. There are going to be opportunities for you to reflect, to jot down some notes. So you may want to have pen and paper nearby or an open screen on your computer. So scientific research has shown how children learn to read and how they should be taught. But many educators don't know the science and in some cases actively resist it. And I saw as folks were coming in and putting in the chat why they're here, a lot of interest in learning the science behind the reading and actually being able to apply it to the classroom. So you're in the right place. But due to teachers not having that information, or if there's resistance, millions of kids aren't being set up to succeed. So we're going to listen to a short excerpt from a podcast by Emily Hanford that delves into this big idea. A false assumption about what it takes to be a skilled reader has created deep inequalities among children in the US, putting many on a different path in life. There are some questions here on the slide. I want you to consider those as you're listening to the podcast. And it's about 5 minutes that we're going to listen to, and then we'll have an opportunity to share out.
The word. Good readers may guess at the meaning of the word, but they don't guess at the print on the page. We're going back to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania now, where balanced literacy was the prevailing approach to reading instruction until the district got serious about trying to do something about all those kids who were struggling with reading. Morning, Lindy. Hi, Grant. This is Kathy Bast. She's walking the halls of Calypso Elementary, where she's the principal. Back in 2015, when Bethlehem realized it needed to change the way it taught reading, district leaders decided the first step would be a series of trainings for all the principals at the district's 16 elementary schools. Over the course of an entire school year, the principals were going to be taught the reading science. As it happened, Kathy Bast was out on medical leave when the trainings began, but her colleagues warned her.
They said to me, Kathy, we know you. You're not going to take well to this training.
The principals were learning about the importance of explicitly teaching children how to decode words, and everyone was sure Kathy Bast was going to resist.
They knew who I was and how reading was a passion, and that decoding was never part of anything I ever did.
But Kathy Bast had a secret. Even though she was known as the district's #1 balanced literacy champion, she had doubts. Before becoming a principal, Kathy Bast had been a reading specialist. It was her job to help struggling readers. In her training to become a reading specialist, she says she learned a lot about how to identify a child with a reading problem, but she learned nothing about how to help a child actually learn to read.
I didn't know what to do, except just give them more books, and it wasn't working.
With time on her hands while she was on medical leave, Kathy Bast began reading about reading, and she discovered the vast scientific literature. When she returned to work from medical leave and joined her fellow principals in the trainings on the reading science, she was ready to hear what the trainer had to say, and it kind of blew her mind.
Wow, okay, let's go get at this.
The training the principals were doing used a curriculum written by Louisa Moats. You heard her earlier. The curriculum is called Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, or LETTERS for short. The principals went through the training in 2015. The kindergarten teachers went through it the next year. Then the district's 1st and 2nd grade teachers did the training. I got to sit in on it for part of a day.
Good morning, everyone. Okay.
The training was led by Mary Doe Donaker. She's an educational consultant.
Which word doesn't begin with the same sound? Theory, therefore, thistle, thinker. Therefore.
For children to clearly understand how letters represent speech sounds, they need to be able to hear the speech sounds, and teachers do too, It's not always easy.
Tell me the first sound you hear in Eunice.
Hmm.
Y. Y. Before you get to the ooh. How about Charlotte?
Once kids can isolate the sounds in a word, their next task is to understand how letters represent those sounds. In English, we have 44 different speech sounds, or phonemes. Each phoneme is represented by a letter or combinations of letters. Research shows when kids are explicitly taught how letters represent phonemes, they become better readers. But phonics isn't enough. Kids can learn to decode words without knowing what the words mean. To comprehend what they're reading, kids need a good vocabulary too. Scientists came up with a model to explain the relationship between a person's ability to decode text and their ability to comprehend what they're reading. Scientists called it the simple view of reading, and it's basically a math formula. It says this: reading comprehension equals decoding skills times language comprehension. Language comprehension is what develops naturally in children when people talk to them.
It's just my toothbrush and toothpaste.
Decoding is what kids have to be taught. Some kids learn decoding quickly and easily. Others need much more instruction. But a child who can't decode will never be a good reader because of that math formula. 0 times anything is 0.
Yeah.
In their training on the science of reading, the teachers and principals in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, learned about the simple view of reading and a lot more. There's quite a bit to know about the structure of the English language to be able to teach it to little kids. I sat down with 3 teachers who were in the first group to go through the training in Bethlehem. I asked
Thanks. So as Sarah's putting the slides back up, I just want to reiterate that Hanford's ideas reflect the current reality for students across our country. So some of our kiddos are getting excellent instruction, digging into complex texts and grappling with big ideas, while others are getting reflection that reflects less stellar experiences, teaching focused on drills, low-level texts that lack the vocabulary and ideas that they'll need later on. And obviously, everyone is here because we know that's not okay. These disparities all too often affect our most marginalized students the most. So if we have a student of color, a second language learner, a student with IEP, those students are less likely to get the right opportunities in literacy instruction and more likely to end up not reading well and everything that comes along with that. So I'm going to state the obvious here. Strong literacy skills are crucial for success and in life, whether we're talking about reading a text, filing your taxes, or learning how to install a car seat. Now revisit the data that Sarah shared with us at the beginning. And let's look at it again and think about how we're positioned to make change and what power this knowledge gives us. So take a minute to reabsorb the data on the next 2 slides. So now let's take a look at the opportunities we can afford all of our students by rooting our instruction in the science of reading. So when our instructional practices are shaped by the cognitive and neuroscience research behind how a child learns to read, 95% of our students are capable of learning to read proficiently without significant intervention. And for the 5% who require significant intervention, research-based approaches allow us to identify who those learners are and how best to provide strong intervention for them. So the science of reading gives us the tools to be the change here in the state of Nevada. So we've looked at the data and we've listened to the podcast about what it's likely holding students back in reading proficiency. To take a minute and just think about how literacy and equity are linked and what are the implications of this for your work. We're going to be coming back to this idea of the link between literacy and equity a fair amount throughout these sessions. I just want to keep that in mind. So how are literacy and equity linked? And what are the implications for your work? Right now, we're just going to do some silent reflection. In a bit, you'll have a chance to go into some breakout rooms and have conversation with your colleagues. All right, so I want you to just keep that in mind throughout our time together this morning. So the science of reading is typically meant to encompass the large body of research-based reading instruction. These studies have revealed a great deal about how we learn to read, what goes wrong when students don't learn, and what kind of instruction is most likely to work the best for most students. So here on the screen, you see 4 essential research-based practices of literacy instruction. We need our teachers to provide explicit, systematic instruction in the foundations of reading and language that's responsive to students' needs and assets. We need teachers to anchor reading instruction in texts that are appropriately complex for their grade band and are worthy of critical reading and rereading to engage with important ideas and build students' knowledge. We need our teachers to expose our youngest readers to complex text by read alouds that they can't yet decode themselves. We need our teachers to provide access to diverse, complex texts that are sequenced to build knowledge and vocabulary and provide students with windows and mirrors into their own experiences, and to explicitly teach the art of writing and provide opportunities for students to write and speak about texts and their ideas, as well as their own ideas and knowledge. So how do we do this? The podcast mentioned the simple view of reading. So in 1986, Go and Turner published a theory called the simple view of reading. This theory tells us that the amount of words that one can decode multiplied by the amount of language they understand equals reading comprehension. This is the foundation of science of reading. We're going to dig a bit more into it. Here's an example of the simple view. The little dog barked at the big cat. Think about what set of skills and knowledge is needed to read this sentence. So to read the sentence proficiently, a student must do 2 things. 1, read the words accurately and fluently, and 2, comprehend the meaning of the words being read. Accurate, fluent reading requires the integration of visual, auditory, and cognitive skills, and we'll dig into that. We see the letters, produce the sound each letter makes, and put the sounds together to form words. We want students to read the words quickly and be able to read it automatically. And finally, to comprehend the sentence, students must know what dogs and cats are, what bark means, and that little and big refer to size. Despite being called the simple view, we know it's not simple, but this highlights the systemic instruction in both word and reading comprehension that's needed for our kiddos. Now here's another model, and this is Scarborough's rope, named after Hollis Scarborough. It demonstrates the interconnectedness of decoding and language comprehension. The rope shows how the various skills in literacy develop over time. First, they develop individually, and then they interact with one another. Take a moment to scan the visual, taking account of the individual strands of reading comprehension and word recognition. Each of these components consists of several more specific strands or skills that students need to master in order to become proficient readers. Now consider what happens if one of these strands doesn't develop as the others do. Ultimately, it all unravels. If you have the language comprehension strand down, students will be able to understand the text when it's time to read. If you have the word recognition strand, but kids don't know what the words mean after they decode them, they're still unable to comprehend the text. For today, as you all know, because you signed up for this session, we're going to focus on the reading foundational skills, which focus primarily on word recognition, the components you see in green. Thinking about equity, equity suggests that some students may need more instruction or support around one or more of the 5 components based on their individual needs and shared experiences and lived experiences. So what does this look like for our kiddos? About 35% 35 to 40% of kids will learn to read with relatively little instruction and few repetitions of phonics skills. Another 40 to 50% of kids need systematic, explicit, sequential instruction in how the code of English works to help them build their neural pathways between the visual, auditory, and semantic areas of the brain. And I know I've thrown those words out a few times. We're going to get to those in just a second. And about 10 to 15% of students require systematic sequential instruction in phonics and phonemic awareness with a lot of repetition. So these are students we may consider dyslexic. Doesn't mean that those students aren't able to read, but just that they need more intensive repetition. And then there are some kids who are twice exceptional. For example, a student who has dyslexia and also dysgraphia, or is severely dyslexic, and they'll need additional support in reading probably forever. But that number is less than 5%. So realistically, 95% of students should be reading well with strong instruction. And as we reflected on after listening to the podcast, when a child's not reading well, it's due to a system failure. It's not due to their intelligence, their family, their economic status, their race, their language. And we currently operate within systems that don't support students, and the failures are at multiple levels. So we have a lot of teachers in the room, and we want to acknowledge, like, sometimes teacher trainings promote debunked reading pedagogy or fail to teach teachers how to teach reading at all. There's lack of professional development. There's the fact that early childhood teachers are not recognized as the highly skilled professionals that they are and knowledgeable experts that they need to be. Curriculum materials might not be what they need to be. So there's a long list of barriers here. And again, we know that teaching reading is not simple, nor is learning to read simple for our learners. However, it does mean that we can improve students' options in life by being the best teachers possible of learning to read for all students who continue, even those who struggle, and intervening in effective ways. So we're going to dig into the science of reading a little bit more. So I just mentioned a whole bunch of challenges. However, we know that our students also bring language assets into the classroom, assets that can be honored and leveraged for strong instruction. Earlier, you saw the number of how many students in Nevada are not native English speakers. So thinking about those kiddos and everyone in general, what assets do they bring to the classroom, and how can you recognize and honor them? So in just a minute, you're going to see an invitation on your screen to join a breakout group. And you are going to be able to chat with some colleagues about how you recognize and honor the assets that kiddos bring in, and hopefully get some ideas as well. And you're going to have about 4 to 5 minutes in these breakout rooms.
Are you guys able to put me back in the chat or the room? I was.
Desiree, do you remember which room you were in?
I think it was 2.
Okay. Hmm.
It was the one with Raj, how do you say her name?
Rajvi?
Yeah.
It's not letting me move you. Let's see if we go into breakouts and try it that way. It's not letting me because it says you're still it says you're still in room 2.
Oh, okay. So did I just wait it out then?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring him back in about a minute. Sorry about
Okay. That's okay. Thank you.
that.
Let's see, everyone's coming back in. All right, I think we have a couple rooms that are still floating in the virtual world. All right, I think we're all back. So I hope that you had some good conversation in your breakout groups. We're able to share some ideas and get some ideas. So now that we've had a bit of an overview, we're going to turn our attention to the brain science that supports the need for teaching reading foundational skills. And just a heads up, there's a fair amount of information in the next couple of slides. So just a warning there. So let's start with the fact that every word has 3 representations in our brains. There's the visual or orthographic, so what you see on the page, the speech or phonological, what you hear, and the meaning, the semantic representation. The goal of reading instruction is to support students to be able to link these 3 representations together. That is, they can see the letters B-A-T on a page, know that these represent the sounds B, A, T, blend those sounds together to get the phonological representation bat, and then conjure up an image of a bat, either the flying kind or the baseball kind, depending on their own context. Our brains are hardwired to acquire language and help us be able to speak. So if you could just animate this slide. Thanks. All it takes is being immersed in language around us. And when you're immersed in this language, the speech and the meaning areas of the brain are activated naturally. So when students hear a word, they're hardwired to determine the meaning of that word. The neural pathways naturally exist. So when we hear the word bat, we automatically visualize either the animal bat or the baseball bat. So when it comes to reading, new technology has shown us that it turns out our brains are much more similar than they are different. Our brain is also hardwired to be able to recognize objects and to know what they are or have object recognition. When we see an object, the visual processing section of our brain at the back is activated. However, our brains are not hardwired to recognize text and connect it with meaning without that being taught. For example, when my almost 2-year-old sees the word dog on a page, his brain's visual center doesn't connect with the meaning center automatically the way it does when he actually sees a picture of a dog. This is likely because written language is a relatively new development in human history, invented just a few thousand years ago. Reading requires all of these pieces, the visual piece, the speech piece, and the semantic piece, in order to read a word off the page, know what the word is, and then assign meaning to it. In the beginning stages of teaching students to read, we essentially need to teach the students to recognize the symbols on the page and associate them with sounds. This builds a pathway between the visual representation to the phonological area. And then the speech and meaning areas activate that natural connection to help the student understand the meaning of the word. That is the full act of decoding. Early readers have no choice. They have to take the visual representation through the sound and speech areas to their meaning areas. This is called the phonological route, and it becomes stronger and faster as students become more fluent. But it doesn't go away. We use it when we, even as proficient readers, encounter a new or less familiar word in a text and also have to sound it out. As students strengthen their phonological pathways through systematic phonics instruction, a new pathway forms between the visual and meaning areas of the brain. This is the lexical route, and it's much faster than the phonological route. On the meaning route, we see words on the page and automatically access their meaning without sounding them out, whether we're sounding them out loud or in our head. And as instruction continues and students get more practice with associating letters with sounds and blending them to make words, the phonological route strengthens and new brain structures develop. A specific area of our brain forms that's devoted to recognizing words rather than just objects. And as we get repetition with word sounds and multiple exposures to words, the meaning area of our brain begins to more automatically recognize and assign meaning to those words. Again, the lexical route, a direct route from our visual centers to our meaning centers, increasing the speed of decoding and fluency. These pathways are not naturally occurring though, and they develop in the same way no matter the student. For the vast majority of kiddos, they need to be developed through direct instruction and a lot of repetition. A good analogy here is sports. If you've ever played soccer or really any sport, you know that you don't typically just join a team and hop right onto the field to play a game. Most teams spend hours doing drills to practice the foundational moves that make up the game. These drills are meant to build muscle memory to make those moves automatic when we do get out there for the game. Similarly, explicit teaching of foundational skills is similar. Students need time and repetition to build their brain's muscle memory for word recognition and reading fluency. The amount of time and practice it takes for kiddos to develop these pathways does vary. For some, they form relatively quickly, and for others, it takes a lot of drills. That was a lot. And I don't remember, I did take a neurobiology class in college, but it was a really long time ago and I don't remember most of it. But there was a lot of information about how the brain works and forms these pathways and forms meanings, which I find pretty fascinating. I want you to take a minute to consider how systematic and explicit instruction in phonological and phonemic awareness supports to develop the neural pathways to move towards automatic reading. And how can this lead to more equitable experiences for all? Feel free to put your answer or reflection in the chat. I'd love to hear what folks are thinking at this point. So how can systematic and explicit instruction lead to more equitable experiences for all? Everyone has the building blocks they need. Thanks, Elizabeth, for getting us started. Those new pathways being created, less gaps in student learning. There's the sequence that makes sense. Students have a chance to improve their reading skills and grow their learning. There's building blocks, the explicit teaching of concepts. Yep. Gonna wait about another 30 seconds. The hierarchy of skills. Yep. So before we talk about what we should look for in foundational skills instruction, we're going to briefly touch on what the foundational skills are. And remember, the act of reading ties together the auditory, visual, and meaning representations of words, and the foundational skills align. And in doing so, we're going to address some key terms that will help us make better sense of the brain science. I'm going to ask 5 people to come off of mute and each read one of the definitions, starting at the top. So we can get someone to kick us off with reading the definition of phonological awareness.
Phonological awareness supports student understanding that words are made up of a series of discrete sounds.
Thank you. And if the next person can just pick it up until we get up through all 5 of them.
Phonics teaches students how to map these sounds onto letters and spellings.
The more phonics students learn, the better able they are to decode or sound out words. The more opportunities students get to decode words, the stronger their word recognition skills become.
When students begin to recognize many words automatically, the better their reading fluency, speed, accuracy, and expression becomes.
Fluency improves comprehension. As sentences become more complex, students need to get through enough words fast enough to make sense of what they are reading.
Yeah. So what we're going to do here is, well, just to acknowledge, like if you're sticking around for the next section, we're going to dig a bit into the phonics and word recognition piece today, because that's a really big part of the puzzle. But what we're going to do now is give you an opportunity to go back into breakout groups and think about the curriculum that you're using when you walk into your classroom on Monday, you're walking into your school. And where do you think your curriculum is doing a good job based on the science of reading? And you'll be in your rooms for a couple of minutes. And then when we come back together, I'm going to ask a few folks to share out. Most folks are starting to come back now. So I'd love to hear from a couple of folks and just come off mute and share. Where do you think your curriculum is doing a good job based on this science? And then also when you're thinking about one of the questions that we posed earlier on about the link between reading and equity, literacy and equity, what are you leaving this hour thinking about and walking into your schools on Monday thinking about or doing? So I asked a couple of questions there. How is your curriculum matching up in terms of science of reading? What are you thinking about in terms of the link between literacy and equity? And what does this mean for your work? And I'm going to put myself on mute.
So I'm a teacher in the Clark County School District. So the curriculum that we have for our phonics, I know all the schools have the HMH, but we chose to do the Core 95. And with our Core 95, like all of those elements are like being seen in our lessons. So we always start with like a warm up of the phonological awareness. There's always a new phonics pattern piece at the beginning of every week. And then we build on that with decoding of words. By the end of it, they're having to decode the words with fluency and then like fluency phrases at the end. And then like usually that Thursday, Friday, we have a decoding passage that they have to go back to and answer comprehension questions of it.
That's great. Thanks for getting us started and sharing, Brooke. I got one or two more people to share out.
So I'm a GATE teacher and for Clark County, and our school has the HMH. They just started it. And so I really can't give a lot of input because I don't teach reading per se at the beginning levels like this because I teach GATE, but I can say it's a little frustrating because it seems like the district hasn't provided enough instruction and training on using this new program. And so I know at our school, they're just trying to figure it out. I always felt like in my early days of teaching, when we got a new program, having somebody come in and train was essential so that we're all on the same page and understanding it and applying it and doing it the same way. But I think this year is going to be a little interesting. It's a little nerve-wracking, I think, that they're just having to figure it out on their own. It's kind of scary.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's definitely one of the challenges we highlighted earlier about teachers not being given the proper training to make this happen for our kiddos. Yeah, one last person to share. And it doesn't have to, again, doesn't have to be about your particular curriculum. Maybe just something you're thinking about in terms of literacy and equity.
I think it's important to remember, and I'm trying to share that with our staff on a daily basis, that it's not the program that teaches the kids. Our curriculum, which is the NVACS, is the what, but the how and the why is all about the teachers. And if they really dig deep into the curriculum, and I know that the program is new for everybody in the district, so we're all chunking and chewing, but it's really important that we understand the Nevada Academic Content Standards, which is the Common Core. And then once we do that, then we can dig into the HMH and chunk and chew it, learn from each other. That's what that collective efficacy is. That's why we have professional learning communities here in Clark County, and take it step by step, learn from each other, and we'll get there. It is going to be a process, but again, our teachers are the ones that teach our kids. We have amazing teachers in Clark County and across Nevada. So it's just important that we believe in them and understand that they know what they're doing to support all of our hundreds of thousands of kids.
Thank you. That is a great closing. Just want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Did want to address one comment in the chat. Jess, I hope that you're leaving the session being able to advocate for a program or an amendment to the program for your kindergartners so that you're able to get that instruction. Sarah and I hope that you're joining us for the second session. And if not, we hope that you are leaving here thinking a bit more about how to set your kiddos up for success with reading. If you're joining us, we'll see you in a couple minutes.
Thank you, everyone, for attending session number 2. Please take a moment to complete the attendance tracker and the session survey. We will be closing this room in about 30 seconds.
Are we only doing the attendance tracker? Are we also doing a survey that takes our input?
You should do both, actually.
Okay, hold on. I didn't see the other one. I see the session survey.
I'll drop the session survey.
Okay, I think I got it. Hold on. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
All right, we will close the room and then reopen it.